The Quiet Professional, a podcast about law enforcement, security, justice, and politics. We are digging deeper on the issues and going where the information takes us with access to experts and authorities. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, Nathan Romas with you. Today we are going to be talking about law enforcement, confidential informants, and criminal culture. For that, I have Benjamin Freedland here. Little background on Ben. He is a law enforcement consultant and founder of Strategic Informant Solutions, through which he trains agencies for informant management, intelligence collection, and operational integrity. Ben draws from firsthand experience on both sides of the law. Formerly a mid-level East Coast drug trafficker, he later served as a federally embedded informant with the FBI, U.S. Postal Inspection Service, and U.S. Attorney's Office, where he provided intelligence that led to multiple major federal indictments. Ben served a 77-month sentence. He rebuilt his life and launched Recreational Transport LLC, a national logistics company specializing in high-end RV delivery. And today, he helps law enforcement professionals and potential cooperators bridge the gap between trust and transformation by teaching how to build rapport and communicate from a terminal perspective. Ben is also a proud Jewish American man, husband, father, homeowner, and entrepreneur. So congrats on all that and turning it around. So welcome to you.
Thank you, Nathan. I appreciate the introduction. Yes, out of all the things that you just mentioned, some of them are very sensational, but I'm most proud of being a father and a husband, although it can be hectic at times.
Yeah.
I do, that is my proudest accomplishment. I've done a lot of things in my life to get to where I am today. And I'm joining you from my car studio on a road trip with my family. But I'm taking the time because it's very, very important to speak about this topic. We spoke briefly beforehand. People are dying. This is a very serious issue. And providing the kind of tactical insight that can help law enforcement, whether or not it's in Canada or the United States or really anywhere in the world, is important. Because right now, as I mentioned to you before, fentanyl is overwhelming every law enforcement system in the United States and Canada, healthcare systems. It's just overwhelming everything. And so today, now my focus is on helping to prevent the synthetic narcotic epidemic, which is plaguing our societies, and to help give law enforcement a unique perspective from my point of view.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've had any training from a criminal before. Maybe you've learned a lot from them, but a lot of what you've learned, I'd be wagering to bet that everything has come from someone who is a sworn law enforcement officer or an instructor.
Yeah, the majority.
So
yeah,
my perspective when instructing and teaching law enforcement and making people aware that are in the law enforcement community of how things work from my perspective is very, very important, and it can be used tactically on the job, and not just something that you learn in a seminar, but also potentially something that we can be cohesive with together in an investigation, talking to individuals that are part of something that need to understand more about what will happen as a cooperating witness or an informant. But this is a very important thing, and that's what I'm doing.
And you're bang on with that, because one of the issues with law enforcement traditionally is they're very closed off to everybody, and we can't do it alone. So from journalists to people who've been in the lifestyle, we definitely need to look outside for help and resources, because there's people who have access to things that we don't, people that know how to talk to others like we don't. So
Right.
it's literally a whole team approach, and especially with issues as big as fentanyl and how impactful it is. uh Boy, it's you need more than law enforcement working on this, so multiple systems.
Absolutely.
So I want to start just real quick. Let's get into you, and because I mean, in your bio, we're very specific. Mid-level East Coast drug trafficker. I'm wondering what places you mid-level. But what got you into the lifestyle in the first place? So if you give us some background on yourself and tell us a bit about the life.
Sure, I'll try not to get too distracted with sidebars, but first of all, I grew up in a very wealthy Jewish American neighborhood in West Los Angeles. I was very privileged. I went to Jewish day school in Beverly Hills. I didn't just have a silver spoon, I had a gold plated, diamond studded spoon. I had everything I wanted in my life. My parents raised me very well. Academia was a priority. Travel was something that helped grow my education outside of the school setting. I traveled to Europe every summer with my father. I was very, very privileged, and I had a great upbringing. I eventually went to college, where I was introduced to marijuana, and I became a pretty heavy user of marijuana, which slowed down my education. Instead of 4 years, I graduated in 6 years, but I still graduated from San Francisco State University in 2008. Was already an entrepreneur by then, and started my first company. It was a marketing agency. Um, I used the profits from my first company to travel around the world. I had a very good life, but I returned in 2009 in the United States, we had the recession. I don't know how much it was affecting Canada. I'm sure it did. There was really no room for employment anywhere, even for a new college graduate with entrepreneurial assets like owning a company. So it was very difficult. And I started working, but I was soon laid off from a company called Yelp.com, which is a popular aggregate. Have you heard of Yelp.com?
Yeah.
Okay. So to work there, I was an account manager, but I got laid off and I really had nowhere to go. So I am a big fan of the band Fish and the Grateful Dead, and there is a following of people that go from concert to concert selling things. I knew that the band Fish was coming to town after I got laid off. I went to a Chinese supermarket. I was looking for things to buy, to sell. I found a young Thai coconut, and I took 50 coconuts off the shelf and sold them in the parking lot and sold out. Went to the next show, the next show, the next show, and I became known as the Coconut King. I was selling coconut cocktails from coast to coast at concerts and music festivals. What started off as 50 coconuts turned into 1,500 coconuts, and I was doing very well for myself, selling them at $15 each, and I had an abundance of cash that sort of led me to the world of narcotics and drug trafficking. And that is because after a time during that season in the summertime, there was no longer any festivals for me to go to or sell my my coconuts at, and I needed to make more money. And coming from California, some of the people that I met in the music festival scene wanted me to find marijuana for them and take it to the East Coast in a nutshell. And that's what I started doing. It sort of evolved out of the coconut game, selling coconuts at music festivals. I became introduced to selling drugs and taking the abundance of cash that I had, and I started to finance large loads of marijuana from California, where I sourced it, to the East Coast, where I sold it for 2 or 3 times more than I bought it for in California. 5 pounds turned into 10, 25, 50. Eventually, I linked up with a larger drug trafficking organization outside of the people that I knew in the music festival industry, and I started working with them as their main supplier. And I was bringing upwards of 100 pounds at a time to Philadelphia from California, in all different methods of transport, from train, plane, automobile, bus, and shipping containers. So that is why I am an East Coast drug trafficker, because I sold it to the East Coast. I sourced it from the West Coast. And I am a mid-level trafficker, because a small-time dealer in the United States might be doing, 8 ounces. I don't know what your measurement is out there.
We'll use the same ones. Yeah.
Okay. Well, a small-time dealer might be selling a kilogram of marijuana, where a large-scale drug trafficker is selling hundreds of kilos. And my conspiracy, when I was eventually caught, was 100 to 400 kilos. That places me in the mid range level of trafficking. So there's the smaller guys, there's the much bigger guys, the cartels that are bringing thousands of pounds, I should have said. And then there's the people that do hundreds of kilos.
Yeah.
And so that is where I was sort of classified as a mid-level drug trafficker. I was doing that for many years. I did it for 3 years. Eventually, I was involved in a armed robbery. I was the victim. I was robbed at gunpoint, and it was individuals who were a part of the drug trafficking organization I was a part of. So I felt very betrayed, and that put me over the top, and I began cooperating very shortly after that. But I didn't just do it on a small scale. I began cooperating extensively, not just with the agencies that were investigating me that I had no knowledge of until I reached out to them. I had no idea I had exposure until I reached out. And then I was basically put in touch with the investigator who was investigating the drug trafficking organization, and the umbrella of the individuals that I was working underneath involved, my name. So I started working with that agency. But when they were done working with me and they were starting to begin the case that would become the indictment and the 35-person conspiracy that I was a part of, I began working with other agencies as well, like the ATF and the United States Postal Inspector Service and some state level and county level agencies as well. So my cooperation went from just being a cooperating witness to what is called a paid informant or a professional informant, where my skill sets were used to cultivate brand new cases out of nothing, from walking around and being basically undercover and involving cases that weren't even known yet. So I sort of was in the full spectrum of informant and work with the federal government, law enforcement arms, and also state agencies that I work together with. And I had a very large, I have a very large, professional resume working together with these agencies. And that gives me a very, very unique perspective. Now that I've left the life of crime and I no longer work in the field helping law enforcement as an informant in the field, my goal now is to use that professional knowledge that I gained, that probably not a lot of other informants that had the same capacity as me would be willing to do, and get out there and be transparent about their experiences. That my experiences now are what is going to help law enforcement in the future. So I'm taking everything that I did, and that was my background, and I'm using it to be a beneficial asset to law enforcement.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Yeah, you're 100% right. It is hard to find people who want to come and work with law enforcement, probably to the scale that you were and still are doing. Lots of people I've ever talked to are just like, I just want to leave it behind, and then that they kind of leave it at that. Which that's to each their own. You can't make people join you. But I want to kind of go back just to the beginning. So you were saying, I mean, you came from a family that was well off. It's I'm guessing like a loving situation at home, and you had parents that cared for you. And I think this is what gets lost on a lot of people, especially the way things get talked about in the public. But it's a lot of, people instantly make excuses for the offenders or the criminals when they get into this lifestyle, and they go, oh, they might, like, it has to be a broken home, and they have to have been abused, or they come from nothing, or there's a million excuses made for them. But a lot of the guys that I've dealt with once I was in the gang unit, uh, like, they have a nice house. Their parents are trying to send them to university, but for one reason or another, they decide to go into the lifestyle. I'm wondering for you, outside of cash, like, because you were saying you're trying to make some cash, what was it that pushed you into that lifestyle? Because you would have come in with some values, some morals, like your family raised you a certain way. Um, like, did you just kind of disregard that stuff and cash was king? Or I just wonder the psychology of it all, like how people decide, I'm gonna continue to go through with this.
Well, that's a great question, and I think that could be an entire episode. But in short, I did have privilege, and I did sort of dismiss those values that
Hmm.
were instilled And I just guess I didn't really care or even think about the consequences. Greed was definitely a factor. Once I noticed that I could make a lot of money really quick and I didn't really have to do much outside of doing things that might get me in trouble, which I sort of dismissed thought of, it was a free for all. I just decided that I didn't really care. I wasn't really thinking about the consequences. Um, and so I dismissed the values and the principles that were instilled in me as a young, Jewish man, growing up in privilege in, the enclaves of Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, and some of the wealthy areas of, most wealthy neighborhoods in the United States. No, don't go. You should never cut anybody short. Like you just said, there are some individuals that enter the world of crime that are very intelligent and that were raised the same way as I was. It just so happens that um, it's disproportionate to the amount of people that come from families that are broken with single mothers
Mm-hmm.
and very, very low socioeconomic strata. There's a lot more crime that is born from that, but there's still crime that is born from people with my backgrounds as well. I mean, I'm just a case study of it myself. I think it's really interesting to ask that question, but also, once I started, this is, I regret even saying this, but in my work as a drug dealer, I became feared
Mm-hmm.
and thought of this before. Um, the acknowledgement of fear in the eyes of people was a rush for me. I
Yeah,
really enjoyed the fact that people um, feared me
it's the power.
tremendously. Yeah, it was power, and it's a drug itself. For certain people, some people go to Narcotics Anonymous, and other people go to Criminals and Gangsters Anonymous. It's actually a group. I
Oh,
went to it
really?
for a while.
Oh.
Yeah, it's got the same 12-step program, and but I mean, people are addicted to. I was never, big into drugs. I wasn't a user. I rarely have a drink now. I was addicted to power, instilling fear in people, and money,
Mm-hmm.
and women, and fast cars, and vacations, and being, staying at the Ritz Carlton for 2 weeks at a time, and leaving with $100,000 in cash, and having a girlfriend in San Francisco and Philadelphia and Los Angeles, and just not having one place to be outside of just traveling all over the country. It's a rush, and it's highly addictive,
Yeah.
and it feels great to be perfectly honest with you. Now I look back at it and I think, what the fuck was I doing?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Now I'm walking down the street with my little girl holding her hand as she's just starting to walk, and I think of myself, you know, 9 years ago, a ruthless drug trafficker with no fucks given. Um, it's difficult now even to sort of transition to, some of the things that happen occur to me. I respond a different way, and I just have to catch myself. But to answer the root of your question, the power, the greed, and the money is what drove me,
Mm.
and that's what drives a lot of people. And you can get easily hooked on it. Trust me. Even people in law enforcement do. They
Yeah.
see it, how easy it is, and it's um, it's a drug, just like any other drug.
And when you talk about like how you're walking with your daughter now and some of the things you think about, and like recently here in Edmonton, so this would be a year and a half ago now, maybe 2 years now. We had one of the more prominent organized crime figures in the city. He got killed with his son in the vehicle, and they whacked the son too. And the it's just like there's almost no rules, right? Like you never know when it's coming for you, and what they're going to do, and your family is just as eligible to be victims of some of these crimes. So yeah, it's something that it's always I always like asking that of people, and even the informants I've worked with, even people that aren't informants, and you just stop them on the street for whatever reason. Is always like to kind of find out like what exactly led you into that lifestyle. Uh, kind of like when you talk about like the people from a broken home, um, I find they would always do it more for there's the protection of a group. There's family. There's like a family element to it. But then when you get to some of these guys who it's like you still go home to mom, you have your siblings, like you all seem to get along on the surface level, like what I can see. Um, so it's like, why do you do it? But I think you give a really good explanation of it, like how it becomes intoxicating. And then it's also setting aside like you're not thinking about the values you were raised with. And it's like, I'm not really thinking my parents are gonna be real pissed at me when I'm doing this stuff. So uh that's maybe one other thing I should ask about. You know, did your parents did they come into this at all? Did they know, like, when did they find out about any of this? And what has been their reaction over all these years and now?
The way that the family dynamic works in the world of the criminal mind is that it's very important, obviously, and it's difficult to explain to your family what it is exactly that you're doing. But if you're going to be a family man, you can't be a criminal as well. But you can, but that's just not right. It's negligent. You're ruining another individual's life because your job as a father is to raise your children, and you can't be committing crimes because you'll end up in jail or prison or dead,
Hmm.
which is exactly what happened to the individual that you mentioned, who was targeted and whose son was killed as well as he was. So, in short, while my family did not know what was going on, it was definitely a driving force for me to understand that I needed to make amends for the things that I had done, so that when I could explain to them what I had done, that I was making a difference as well.
It's kind of the shit sandwich. You're like, okay, I did all this, but I'm doing these good things right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I risked my life, and so I risked not being able to see my family, and that is, obviously something that is a factor to think about. And so that only came later on after my incarceration, um, in in earnest. I mean,
Hmm.
I definitely risked my life before my incarceration as well, but family is the bedrock of my life and my everything that I stand for. I stand for in family values. You cannot mix those two together. My family was not very happy about the trajectory of what I was doing, so when I told them, all right, yeah, I did these things, but I've been cooperating with federal law enforcement, I'm trying to help, that really helped ease it a little bit.
Okay.
So,
One of the things I was wondering too, and just kind of maybe on the family idea, is the people that worked for you. So, what kind of a boss were you? And have you ever seen any of these people since you've left the life? Have you ever come across them again?
yeah, I mean, I was very independent, so I did have people working for me, and I brought them back into my life. Some of them, some of them are not very good people to have around. I It's hard for me to accept that because some of the trust that I had with these individuals was, built on life or death scenarios, and so, I felt like maybe I could bring some of these people back into my life, but um, unless you really want to change and you don't want to be a participatory in crime, I'm not really interested in having you in my life anymore.
Yeah.
To me, I think I was a fair and honest boss in the criminal world. The people that were working for me, that were transporting, that were mules, they were all treated well and fairly and with respect. That's really important because at any point someone can turn on you
Hmm.
or rob you. So I was very fair. I paid everyone very well. There was a lot of people that wanted to work with me. I didn't work with everyone. I was very selective about who I used. And so yeah, I was honest and I was fair and I was respectful.
Okay.
Unless I was cross, and I was very vengeful
Yeah.
and I could be violent as well.
Okay. Maybe we'll start just kind of talking a bit about the law enforcement side and some of your work you've been doing. So, what's that been like? And we'll get into all the what they could do better and some of the gaps in the system. So, how's your experience been though?
Well, I'm in the infancy stages of assisting with the law enforcement community. I have unofficially helped many agents and officers just in speaking with them formally and casually, maybe just, while they're in uniform and working, and I can explain to them some of the things that I think are necessary. But I've really in earnest started doing what I'm doing now about 3 months ago. I decided, after sort of a horrific vehicle accident, which caused me to be injured with two herniated discs that required back surgery, that I needed to
Oh,
sort of
geez.
get off the road
Yeah.
and be in an environment where I didn't have to travel as much. So I was just thinking, what could, I mean, I'm still motivated by, earning a living. So what can help me support my family without having to gallivant across the country transporting RVs, which is what you talked about in my bio. I started an RV transport company. It's just not really viable for me to do that as much anymore. So one of the things that I started to think about doing was taking my experience um, as a years long federal informant here in the United States with different agencies, and using my knowledge, not just as a criminal, but as someone who has a degree in speech communication, that's educated both as a street criminal and a book smart, communication scholar, and kind of bottle that up together, write a syllabus, put together a manual, and start talking about effective communication strategies
Hmm.
or handlers that are handling informants to be more effective with their informants, and talking about sort of hands on building of rapport and respect from the criminal perspective with officers who might not have any idea how to do that. A lot of people, at least in the United States, that are working in undercover narcotics operations, there's no course for how to be an undercover agent. There's no course on how to develop an informant effectively. There might be courses about those things, but no one's teaching that from my perspective. And it's something that you have to learn on the job, and it's something that you can completely fuck up
Yeah.
if you do it the wrong way. So having my perspective in teaching officers and agents and investigators and detectives how to think like I think or thought, and how to more effectively communicate with individuals like myself um, on the job is a very, very effective tool that is, maybe they might try to teach these at academies, but it's just not really anything that can be taught unless you're me or someone else that's similar to me. And I'm not trying to say that as a narcissistic, grandiose thought. I mean, and it's would you not agree with me? I mean, would
Yeah.
we need to get more knowledge from my side? This is unconventional training, and that is the root of what I'm doing. I'm not being a conventional teacher. I'm being an unconventional teacher.
One of the things that law enforcement always has a problem with is we're always on our back foot, and it is always playing catch up. So generally, the criminals get some new tech or new way of doing things, whatever it
Mhm.
is, and then we have to figure it out and play catch up. But where I think a lot of what you're doing is it can come into play is getting ahead. So we're using unconventional tactics to then go in and kind of disrupt or take down organizations. So if people could start thinking outside the box and implementing some of those, right? You start doing it at certain scale, at certain speed, and then you just kind of evolve from there. I think we could see major disruptions. And that's something that we did with the gang unit up here, where it was very status quo for a couple decades. And, the bad guys start to figure out the tactics, and disclosure gives away a ton of stuff and so on and so forth.
Right.
Then you start bringing in, oh wow, these guys walk into the bars and get in our face and tell us like we got to go, and they're getting intelligence from this, and they're picking us off here and in our vehicles and wherever else we might be. Um, they were not prepared, and some of that is being that disruptor. So you come in and you change the game, but from our side. And and I say this too with humility. It's we will one day not be relevant, whatever we're doing, and the unit or the methods used will have to change. But that's the thing, is like people have to have that humility to be willing to change, to adapt. You can't be the same forever and ever.
No,
And I think that's very hard for law enforcement, from what I've seen.
it's a hard pill to swallow for law enforcement. Even I would say most of the people that I talk to in law enforcement who are at the higher echelons, that understand, people like yourself, that you really you get it. There's a lot of people at the top of the departments that are really, really interested in what I have to say. And I really appreciate that. But there's a lot of old school cops and investigators and agents that don't want to change.
Yeah.
And there's no way that with the complexity of crime that is occurring, um, you know, in the United States and Canada and Mexico in this day and age, that conventional tactics, and I'm not talking about, when I talk about unconventional tactics, I'm not talking about going in the back and beating someone up and getting them to talk.
Yeah.
That's bullshit. They'll never get anywhere with that. I'm talking about implementing, me and someone that has knowledge and is a real disrupting force in the investigation. It's very difficult for law enforcement to accept that what I have to say might be relevant. And so it's going to take that really, that stigma to sort of push that to the side and start listening because, getting back to fentanyl, we are losing.
Yeah.
We are not, we are way, 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 um, we are, we have not won any battles.
Well, and you know what I saw online, like you had a little back and forth with someone there. Like it was a guy from another police service in the
Yeah,
U.S.
DEA agent. Yes.
Yeah, and they, there is that out there. There's people who just think like, to hell with you, and that's it. Like we don't need to hear from you. It's like uh, I know for a fact here in Canada and like specifically in Edmonton, like there are files we've had that have been massive. Never would have had them if we didn't have the informants or the intelligence that we got from them. They they provide next level investigative services, I'll call it. And you can't run big files without them, or even agents. We can go talk about agents, but um, just doing traditional surveillance and trying to write 1,000 search warrants and production orders and all these things, like it's time consuming, and the amount of effort you're putting in for what you're putting out, not worth it. 100% not worth it. You need to be running informants. They'll get you to where you need to be way faster. It's just you got to find people that can talk, that can handle properly and make sure, your informant's safe and that the police are safe. And but it is difficult work. Like it takes a lot. I mean, when I was running some of these people, the phone would be going all the time. But I liked it. Like I liked being that person in their life. Uh but maybe that's something that you experience, like you've had good handlers or
There's three parts of how I want to answer everything that you just said. One is the individual that you mentioned. He was a DEA agent, and he was very flustered about how one of the individuals that I've sort of collaborated with. His name is Margarito Flores.
Mhm.
He was one of the two twins that distributed the most amount of narcotics for Chapo Guzman, but also helped take him down. This guy was investigating him. He was part of the investigative team. So he sort of just like has it in his head that this individual is a piece of shit and was responsible for so much death and destruction. And he's not wrong,
Mhm.
but he also helped end it. And so I've started to talk to him outside of the public setting, and he's starting to turn around and understand he actually wants to have a conversation with me now. It's
Good.
really difficult, sort of change the perspective of someone who has, when you're fighting a battle and you are targeting an individual within that battle, you have built up such hatred and visceral hate. A lot of the time, unfortunately, that's not very effective, especially if you want to develop that individual as an informant.
Well, you're not seeing clearly. Yeah, you're missing a
Yeah,
lot of
you have tunnel
aspects.
vision.
Yeah.
Correct. Secondly, you talk about how important informants are. That's given. Everyone in law enforcement understands how important informants are. You can't have a big case or a big file, like you said, unless you have an informant that's close to the top or at least somewhere in the spectrum of things that can explain things that you don't know. That's a given. We understand that. But the question is, how do you make that person come uh, to bear fruit more quickly and effectively? And that's where I come in. So as a handler, someone that's, you know, talking directly to a potential cooperating witness or informant, we have to think in the world of law enforcement about how to be more effective when communicating. Those are some of the things that I speak about in my seminars and my instruction. To be effective, to build rapport and respect, gain respect in a certain way, and that will help to develop an informant faster, and that will help you close the cases and files sooner. But it will also help to develop more um, higher level informants. If you, as an investigator, are doing some of these things that I'm talking about, it will help capture these individuals to start cooperating sooner, which is always important, at least in narcotics and especially with fentanyl, because, you know, the sooner that things are taken down, the less amount of narcotics or gang activity is occurring on the street.
Yeah.
So yes, informants are very important, but let's make them more efficient by learning some of the tools and the trade that I can provide, which is what I've talked about. And also, what we can also talk about, before I touch on the last thing that you talked about is, you know, involving an individual like myself in an investigation and being able to talk to a prospective cooperating witness or informant and to talk to them about what life will be like afterwards, what life will be like during, and to sort of guide them, not to convince them. That's not my job, but to be an advocate for them is a truly transformative thing that can start occurring and really make a lot of change. To work together with teams instead of listening to me in a lecture, to bring me into an investigation, maybe sort of talk to some of the individuals that are on the ice about whether or not they want to cooperate or not. That is a really crucial thing that I'll start to do with whatever agency wants to start with me.
Yeah.
Lastly, uh, um, the relationship with handler informant. I think you spoke of this. I have an amazing relationship with my handler, with my main handler. He was a postal inspector, and we started working early on. And I really am modeling a lot of my coursework and my consultation based on my relationship with him. I still talk to him to this day. I visited him a couple of weeks ago while I was in Philadelphia. I have long, honest conversations with him, and I consider him to be my friend. He is an honest person. He always showed me respect, and he changed my life for the
Mm.
better. And now I am not just, I wasn't just a very, very effective informant. And he always tells me, like, there's not a lot of Benjamin Friedlands out there. There's not a lot of people that can do what I did. But
Yeah.
now that I've done that, that's great. But what can I do in the future? And that is, sort of maintain my relationship with him and um, be a friend. When you're a handler and you're speaking with an informant, you're talking to them about situations that can endanger their lives and their family's lives. So that is a very personal bond that you have with that individual. And you need to think of them, whether or not you like it or not, as a friend.
Yeah.
So I would not be surprised if you told me that there are still individuals that you handle that you still talk to. Is that an
Oh
assessment?
yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
talk to
Yeah.
some of the guys?
Yep.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Good.
I think people realize don't, yeah, it is a totally weird when you're talking to someone, you're like, I know that you are a major drug trafficker. I know that you've put money on people, like those kind of things. But yeah, you end up you still have to remember, obviously, it's like you are the police and there's a purpose for this relationship. But
Right.
that doesn't mean yeah, like you're saying, like you're still gonna treat them a certain way and you're respectful. But I mean, I don't know how many times I've had them call me at 2, 3 in the morning because they literally have nobody else to talk to. And all their friends ditch them or
Right.
they can't trust them and you're the only one. The biggest thing is you're the only consistent in their life and they a
Correct.
lot of the time can't even get that from their family because the family's judging them or saying something, right? Like like get out of the house. I don't want you coming here or whatever it might be. So they still have a hard time with that. But it is when you become the only consistent person, then it opens doors but you're also taking care of them. So you're trying to find ways
Right.
for them to deal with family issues. You're trying to find them. You might even be trying to find them a real job outside of the life, like things to transition them out. Um, so it is strange. It's fun. It's exciting. It's like all these things in one. But yeah, it
It's
is.
really interesting that you talk about that, and I'm assuming, like, you're not working cases with those individuals that you're talking to still, some of them?
Yeah, no cases. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, it's so, so important because, especially if they've just become an informant and they're leaving behind that life, you're very, very right. There's no one as consistent as you are. You're basically their new best friend and their only consistent um, positive influence. And so they're always going to look up to you. And that's how I look up to my friend and my former handler.
Hmm.
Um, it's this is something that no matter what anyone in law enforcement wants to say is rarely talked about.
Yeah.
Who is talking about this shit?
Yeah. Well, that's the whole purpose of the podcast, is because we're
Yeah.
trying to talk about things that other people aren't saying. Like, you know, people like doing the soft, easy topics a lot of the time. It's like, well, we need to talk about this. This is real. I mean, not only that, but when we talk about physical mental health, I'm like, yeah, I can say my bosses annoy me, or I have problems with the procedures and processes around here. I'm like, what about when I keep getting called by a guy who's probably going to die any second, and I'm trying to figure out his life, but I'm trying to run my own life? How do I talk to a psychologist about that? Right? Like, who do I go to for that? And it's like,
There's not many that's really interesting because, even so, I know I can really, really relate to that because, I have a different background than you, obviously. But crime, you're interfacing crime routinely. And so that kind of trauma, especially the kind of dynamic that you just talked about, is very difficult to talk to a psychologist about.
well, and there's the privacy issues too, right? I can't go in and say,
Right.
hey, so and so, this person is this problem for me or whatever. It's like, I can't divulge that.
I think that's why people like you and I can relate so viscerally
Hmm.
because we have had these it's like you know a, a a litany of traumas that is difficult to talk about but is part of the job, as part of the lifestyle that I had, and it's difficult to talk about, so only so many people can talk about these things.
Yeah.
I can talk to you about that because that makes me comfortable, you're comfortable talking about it, but this is not comfortable things to talk about. And so um let's get into maybe like something that I'll talk about when I lecture someone or instruct a potential handler. We need to harness that,
Yeah.
embrace. We need to embrace the connection that you as an officer has and the criminal has as well. There's a lot of trauma that occurs that you are interfaced with, death and suicide and overdoses. Guess what? The criminal sees the same thing. And so we need to have a common bond and we need to relate and build rapport that way. That will earn your respect when you're talking to an individual that you might want to have be an informant or a cooperating witness. Just be real. Don't, don't be fake. Be 100% transparent and talk about these things just the way that we're talking about it now.
Hmm.
Because guess what? I'm not a law enforcement agent. I'm not a police officer. We've established my background very well. You have those titles, and we're still able to have a conversation the way what we're having.
Yeah.
This is exactly what we need to do in law enforcement.
Well,
Right here, what we're doing right now.
and don't lie. That's one big thing. Don't lie, because people always find out, or they'll catch you in it, and then that's all the stuff you've built is gone. So, um, and I guess kind of on this, I want to talk about like your idea here. So this is really unique. Where you're looking at like, okay, I can come in and kind of show somebody who might be on the edge of leaving the life or flipping. I can show them the light, like what it might be beyond
Right.
where they are right now. Uh, where did that idea kind of come to you from? Like, did you have a certain experience, or did you just see this one day and you're like, hey, this is what's missing? Because I think it's a really cool idea.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I started doing the uh, consultation work and sort of posting these things online ahead um, of my, launching my consultation business. And I was just trying to figure out my place in the world of all of this. Aside from just dispensing invaluable information to law enforcement on a social media forum LinkedIn where, some of the things that I post get 10 to 15,000 impressions, and a lot of engagement outside of the seminars that I propose to teach and that I will be participatory in. Michael Brown, the host of the Opioid Matrix, who just featured on a podcast yesterday, he's a very intelligent man. We spoke about him prior to the show starting. 32-year veteran of the Drug Enforcement Administration who worked, intensely undercover for many, many years outside of the country in different, foreign sites where the DEA was stationed. He told me, he said, we had a very frank conversation, just as we're having right now. And he said, you know what? I think that you would be most beneficial to, embed yourself with a team of agents or investigators in the middle of building a case. Cases are built in the United States over a very long period of time. It could take years.
Yeah.
And so as we're trying to develop informants and cooperating witnesses in these large federal investigations, he told me, this is something that you might really want to inject yourself, or, not you, but the agencies might really want to inject you into the playbook so that you or that I can explain to these individuals just exactly how their life will be once they begin to cooperate, how cooperation should be done, because, I have experience cooperating and being an informant. So if I can explain these things from my background to these people who are on the edge of, flipping and really trying to better understand what their life is going to be like, that is a game changer. And Michael Brown, the DEA agent and the host of the Opioid Matrix, he's the one that sort of uh, gave me that idea. And I think honestly that that's going to be the best idea out of my wheelhouse of things that I'll be doing. Aside from the lectures, aside from the seminars, aside from the, informational blurbs that I put out on social media, on LinkedIn, I have a very large following now. And those are all great things. But if I can somehow get in to work together with a law enforcement agency and help them in these investigations to cultivate their informants more effectively, to give their informants more ease and peace of mind, that is going to be a game changer for any agency that begins to work with me.
Yeah.
Now, to have someone like Michael Brown, a 32-year veteran of the DEA and working undercover narcotics investigations for 3 decades, tell me that is something that I should do and that will be very effective. That's something that is very, first of all, it's very promising for the field that I want to begin working with. But it is also not just an amazing idea, but it is something that can be transformative.
Yeah.
Because it's not happening now, and it needs to happen. And so, whoever's listening to this, whatever, chief of police or special agent in charge, whomever is listening to this and is saying and thinking to themselves, wait a second, why aren't we doing this?
Yeah.
And maybe we should bring him in. Well, talk to me. I have a phone number that's available 24/7, 365, 310-775-1472. We'll put that in somewhere underneath the podcast. And I have a website, strategicinformantsolutions.com. And my email address is ben@strategicinformantsolutions.com. So if you're listening to this and you're saying, why aren't we doing this? Well, let's have a frank conversation about how to do this and how to be unconventional, because as Michael Brown talks about frequently, do you know what a hydra is? It's like a mythological
Many
figure.
head. Yeah.
It has like different heads that pop out.
Yeah.
Well, you can knock off a head in a drug investigation or a gang investigation. But guess what? It's going to grow back. And it's like we're losing the war and we need to win it. It's a very difficult war to win. But we need to make headway in our battles. And we need to introduce unconventional tactics like the things that I'm proposing, not just to listen and learn from the seminars that I teach in handlers about, but to integrate people like me and other individuals that I can introduce to other agencies into the mix.
Yeah.
It needs to happen because whatever we're doing now, it ain't working.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. We got to get you up here and talking to some services. I said the same to Margarito. So he did the podcast 2 months ago now.
He was on it?
Yeah.
He was on the show? Okay.
Yeah. So he did the podcast. I've had Mike on twice, and he's got a third one coming up. So yeah, love the guys. They're very good, very smart, and they're doing things differently. And that's what we need. We need that disruption. You need the game changers, and we need people to kind of get out of this like stale, just the funk of like, I just go to this really generic conference and they just tell me the same thing that I'm going to hear at a million others, and it just becomes a drinking fest or something. It's like,
Well, how often? Let me just ask you. To
mm,
disrupt you for. How often are you frustrated in your work?
oh,
How often do you hit a wall?
yeah, you could say that every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
So goddamn frustrating. There's, and it's frustrating. I'll just fill in the blanks for you. It's frustrating because you know, drug dealers keep popping up after big ones are taken down, or even small ones. You see the same kind of addiction, the same type of addictive behavior. You see the same type of people, the same people on the streets that are doing the same thing. Maybe even after they overdose, they'll just start using again. It's so incredibly frustrating. It happens in your work, in your line of work, but it also happens to many of the people that are listening in their personal lives, because there's this drug epidemic, and this sort of epidemic of addiction is affecting everyone, not just the people that interface it like you in the field, but it affects everyone's lives as well.
Hmm.
And so um, this is a tool for change, and we need to utilize it and implement it into our law enforcement strategy. I would love to come up to Canada, but I have to get permission
Oh,
because your country will not let me in. I think I was actually deported from your country once.
oh, really?
Yeah, I came up there, and I had some previous felonies prior to my incarceration, and they put me in secondary, and they looked at my history, and they said, not only are you leaving after like 10 hours of not interrogation, but looking into my file, but if you come back, we'll arrest you. So they deported me. So, yeah, listen, I think I could come back with special permission,
Yeah.
especially doing something like this. And I would love to, because Canada is a great country, and there's a lot that I would like to see up there.
Well, we let everybody else in up here. I'm sure you could get in now. Seems like it's open borders up here this time.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to go up there. I would love to get some face-to-face time with some investigators that are working drugs or narcotics. So I don't know if that can happen, but I'd be very open to it. And just to anyone else who's listening that is interested in speaking to me about doing a collaboration, I'm very open to it. I'm on this side now, so
I'll put all the stuff in the episode description, any links that you need as well. Just as we do kind of come up to the end of the time here, one thing I did want to ask, if I got you for a few more minutes, is just kind of the importance of Canada. And we were speaking about this offline, but you were saying like Mexico's a kind of a shit show, and working with law enforcement down there, it's difficult because there's a lot of infiltration. But Canada and US, a lot of the stuff works the same. I mean, we work with US partners all the time. There's a ton of overlap, a ton of sharing. So if you could just kind of speak a bit about the importance of that relationship, and then what might be going on from the criminal side, or why Canada might be important to the overall conversation.
of course, infiltration within the Mexican law enforcement system is overwhelming. It's endemic. It's part of the culture. It's difficult to trust anyone. There's a lot of violence, death, and destruction. It's just something that, unless you're the ballsiest kind of individual, it's something that you don't really want to be participatory in involvement with. The relationship with transnational partners like Mexico and Canada is very, very important. But with what I've just said about Mexico, it's very difficult and sort of a circuitous path to get to someone that you can trust. I mean, even the top, federal prosecutor was implemented in what was his name, Generaro.
Oh boy, I wouldn't be able to give you a name.
Well, there, all the way to the top of the totem pole in
Yeah.
Mexico, you have individuals that are, connected and on the payroll of the cartels. I do not believe that to be the case with Canada. There's a huge issue with China providing precursor chemicals to the cartels in Mexico. And now that there is a new act within the United States to designate the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, FTOs, it is really putting a damper on the production of fentanyl in Mexico that's crossing over to the United States. And so there is a uptick in the production of that into Canada, and that will start, the border is way more porous, and there will be more fentanyl coming in over the northern border into the United States from Canada. And so collaboration together with the different agencies that control the border and the narcotics investigations and interdictions in Canada and the United States is going to become more and more pertinent and important.
Mm-hmm.
Still, those organizations that might be working together with the Mexican cartels in Canada are designated as foreign terrorist organizations. We really need to put trust into the law enforcement community. It's very difficult, whether or not you, whatever political spectrum you fall under, there's a lot of distrust in the United States right now when it comes to the Justice Department. I just really, really hope that we can, come together to work on these issues, which is, endangering Canadian citizens as well as United States citizens.
Yeah.
The fentanyl epidemic and the precursor drugs that are now coming into Canada that are controlled by the Mexican cartels is a real thing. If you don't know about it, now you do. Look into it. It's happening. And we need to work together collaboratively to try to quash the flow as best as we can. It's very important to have a relationship with our neighbors in the north, whether or not we can get past some of the animosity that our current administration has created.
Mm-hmm.
That really doesn't matter because lives are at stake, and we need to concentrate on keep the eyes on the prize. And not everyone in the United States thinks the same way. So we have to just get past maybe some of the animosity that we have towards one another.
Yeah.
I don't have any animosity, but certainly, some of the things that are occurring within our administration make it difficult to have a proper relationship. I'm sort of really trying to be careful with how I say that.
You know what? Maybe I'll jump in on that too, though, is from our side of things, it's definitely the political class are not telling the truth. They're not saying the right things. We know that fentanyl and precursors and fentanyl in different forms, maybe it's not the completed form, but it goes down and just needs one more process done to it. Like, it's flowing from Canada south, but we do not have an honest conversation about that. And when they're trying to make trade agreements and do all these other things, you can bet your ass they're going to be like, we're not talking about fentanyl. Like, any of the law enforcement agencies, you're not saying anything about that. Doesn't exist. And it's politicking. And it's like, people die in the meantime. And again, going back to like the things we were saying earlier, we need to have an honest conversation. So, certain people need to take those conversations over and make sure it's getting out there. And, I think that's part of what we're doing here, part of what you're going to be doing with your business. And when you start talking to law enforcement, it all plays into the bigger game that we're a part of. And, it's at the end of the day, it's about saving lives. So
politics aside, we need to have cohesion, especially when it comes to enforcing narcotics and transnational gangs. We need to leave political ideology and vitriolic rhetoric to the side. We have to work together to control this, because I've said this many times during the podcast. We are not winning this war. We are not even battles right now. So we need to do things. We need to work together to make that happen.
Cool. Hey, man, Ben, this was an awesome conversation. And, I hope to have you back on in the future. And we'll get an update on how the business is going. And, if we can get you up here, or I'll come down there and see one of the presentations. But we'll definitely have to chat again. And thanks for doing it from your car. I know you're on vacation.
No, I was very flustered in the beginning. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I was in different time zones, and My apologies to everyone watching who's, looking at the video and seeing cars go past. I just made the best out of a situation. Part of law enforcement work, and you'll understand, is just improvising. It doesn't matter where you are,
100%.
make things happen. And so that's what I'm doing right now in this car studio of mine.
Cool. Okay, hang on the line for 2 seconds. I'll talk to you just after. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening in and following along with the discussions. Be sure to click the follow or subscribe button on your respective listening platform. Also, check out the Quiet Professional on X and Instagram under TQP780. And most importantly, please share where you can. Everyone has a part to play in getting these education and information pieces out there, so pass it along. Thanks again.